The massive space station orbited the gas giant Kepler-4 for 2b, its metal halls buzzing with activity from dozens of alien species. Representatives from across the galaxy had gathered for the monthly Galactic Federation Council meeting. In the main conference room, holographic displays showed star maps and trade routes, while delegates argued about mining rights and shipping lanes. Admiral Zexkai stood 12 feet tall, his 4 eyes scanning the room as his mandibles clicked together in thought. His blue-gray skin had the texture of ancient leather, marked with scars from countless battles across 3 star systems. As the Federation's chief military advisor, he had seen every type of weapon the galaxy had to offer. Energy cannons that could melt through starship hulls, plasma rifles that turned enemies to ash in seconds, graviton bombs that could crush entire cities. But today, something puzzled him more than any military strategy ever had. The human delegation sat at the far end of the curved table. They looked small compared to the other species present. No massive claws like the Vorthok, no crystalline armor like the Christek, no floating gas forms like the Nebula-born, just soft pink skin, simple cloth uniforms, and what Admiral Zexkai could only describe as a stubborn expression on their faces. Commander Jake Morrison was the human representative. His hair was turning gray at the temples, and his face showed lines that came from years spent squinting at distant stars. He wore a simple blue uniform with silver stripes on the shoulders. Nothing fancy, nothing that screamed advanced technology. He looked like he could have walked off a farm somewhere, except for the sharp intelligence in his eyes. Next to Morrison sat Dr. Lisa Carter, a woman with short brown hair and glasses that she constantly adjusted when thinking. She carried a simple tablet computer, ancient by galactic standards. Most other delegates used quantum neural interfaces that connected directly to their brains. The humans still used their fingers to press buttons. Admiral Zexkai cleared his throat, a sound that came out like grinding metal. Commander Morrison, we need to discuss your latest request. Morrison nodded calmly. Which request would that be, Admiral? The one about bringing your weapons aboard Federation vessels during joint military operations. Zexkai pulled up a holographic display showing the human weapon specifications. According to this data, you want to bring what you call kinetic projectile weapons on our ships. A ripple of what could only be described as electronic laughter came from the Vorthok delegate, Ambassador Hishara. Her snake-like body was covered in metal plates, and her voice came through a mechanical translator that made everything sound cold and calculating. Kinetic projectile weapons, she repeated, her tone dripping with amusement. How wonderfully primitive. The Christek representative, a being made entirely of living crystal that sparkled under the room's lights, chimed in with sounds like wind through glass. Are these the metal slugs propelled by chemical explosives that we read about in your historical files? Morrison's expression didn't change. Yes, that's correct. Bullets, as we commonly call them. This time, the laughter wasn't electronic. It came from a dozen different species, creating a sound like a broken orchestra. The gaseous, nebula-born delegate pulsed bright yellow, which their species did when they found something extremely funny. Even some of the more serious delegates allowed themselves small smiles or the equivalent expression for their species. Admiral Zexkai held up one of his 4 arms for silence. Commander Morrison, I must ask, your species has access to our technology, databases. You can manufacture plasma rifles, ion cannons, graviton disruptors, quantum phase weapons, and molecular dissolution beams. Why would you choose to use metal projectiles powered by controlled explosions? Dr. Carter leaned forward and adjusted her glasses. Admiral, if I may, our weapons may seem primitive to you, but they have served us well for centuries. Centuries. Ambassador Hishara's mechanical voice rose in pitch. Most species abandon such crude methods within decades of developing proper energy weapons. Are humans simply slow learners? Erupted in more laughter. The Catherian delegate, war leader Dexlon, joined in with deep, rumbling sounds. From his chest, Dexlon was 7 feet tall, with skin that looked like gray rock and eyes that glowed red in the dim light. He had fought in 17 major campaigns across the galaxy and was considered one of the finest military minds alive. Perhaps, Dexlon said, his voice like distant thunder, we should provide the humans with proper weapons training. I could arrange for some of my soldiers to demonstrate how civilized species conduct warfare. Morrison remained perfectly still during all the mockery. He had expected this reaction. When humans first joined the Galactic Federation 5 years ago, every species had looked down on them. Their technology was primitive, their ships were slow, their weapons were laughable. But humans had survived in a galaxy that didn't want them, and they had learned patience. I appreciate the offer, war leader, Morrison said quietly, but our soldiers are quite satisfied with their current equipment. Admiral Zexkai studied human commander with 2 of his 4 eyes, while the other 2 examined the weapon specifications. Commander, I have reviewed your military history. You have fought pirates, rebel factions, and even some small alien raiders. But you have never faced a truly advanced military force. Perhaps you simply don't understand what modern warfare looks like. Dr. Carton spoke up again. Admiral, we understand perfectly well what your weapons can do. We've studied every energy weapon design in the Federation database. We've run computer simulations. We've tested, captured equipment from various conflicts. We know exactly how advanced your technology is. And why? The Christech delegate chimed like breaking glass. Do you insist on using these antique weapons? Morrison finally smiled, and something in that expression made Admiral Zexkai's mandibles stop clicking. Because they work. The room fell silent for a moment. Then the laughter started again, louder than before. They work. Ambassador Hishara's translator couldn't quite capture the electronic sarcasm. Against energy shields, against plasma-resistant armor, against quantum phase protection. Admiral, Morrison said, ignoring the continued laughter, I'd like to make a proposal. Zexkai's 4 eyes focused on the human. What kind of proposal? A demonstration? A war game, if you will. Okay. My soldiers against any force you choose. We'll use our kinetic weapons. Okay. They can use whatever advanced technology they prefer. The laughter died away quickly. War leader Dexlon leaned forward, his red eyes glowing brighter. You will stake your military reputation on such a demonstration. I would. Admiral Zexkai clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. The humans had never backed down from a challenge, no matter how outmatched they seemed. It was either brave or incredibly stupid. What would be the terms of this engagement? Dr. Carter pulled up data on our primitive tablet. Standard war game protocols, training facility, okay, simulators instead of actual weapons. First side to capture and hold a strategic objective wins. And when you lose, Ambassador Hishara asked, when your primitive projectiles fail against proper military technology. Morrison's smile grew wider. Then we'll consider upgrading to your energy weapons. And when we win, Dexlon rumbled, then perhaps you'll understand why we've stuck with bullets for so long. Admiral Zexkai looked around the room at the other delegates. Every species represented had military forces that could crush the small human fleet in open combat. This demonstration would be a chance to show the newest Federation members just how outclassed they really were. It might even convince them to abandon their stubborn independence and fully integrate with galactic society. Very well, the Admiral announced. We'll arrange this demonstration. I'll have my staff coordinate with War Leader Dexlon's forces. The Catherian Guard are the finest soldiers in the Federation. Dexlon's chest rumbled with what passed for laughter among his species. My soldiers have been fighting across the galaxy for longer than your species has had spaceflight. This will be educational. It's for all of us. Morrison agreed, quietly, as the meeting broke up and delegates began filing out of the conference room. Admiral Sexsky watched the human commander. There was something about Morrison's confidence that didn't match the primitive technology his species insisted on using. It was the kind of quiet certainty that came from experience, not ignorance. Dr. Carter was packing her ancient tablet when she noticed the Admiral watching them. "Admiral, if I may ask, what's the most advanced personal weapon in the Federation arsenal?" "The quantum phase disruptor Mark 7, Sexsky replied immediately. It can phase shift molecular bonds and tear apart matter at the subatomic level. Impressive. Carter nodded. "How much does it weigh?" 47 pounds when fully charged. "How many shots before it needs to recharge?" 36 shots, then a 4-minute cooldown period. Carter smiled and adjusted her glasses one more time. "Our standard rifle weighs 8 pounds and fires 800 rounds per minute. No cooldown period. No power source required beyond the ammunition itself." Admiral Sexsky's mandibles clicked rapidly. "But what good is rate of fire if the projectiles cannot penetrate modern defenses?" "That," Dr. Carter said as she followed Commander Morrison toward the exit, "is what we're going to show you." The Admiral watched them leave, his 4 eyes. 3 days later, the Federation training facility hummed with excitement. The massive asteroid had been hollowed out decades ago and turned into the most advanced combat simulation center in the galaxy. Its walls could project any battlefield environment, from jungle worlds to space stations to underwater cities. Today, it would host what many considered the most lopsided military demonstration in Federation history. Captain Ben Rodriguez checked his rifle one more time, running his hands along the familiar metal and plastic. The weapon was over 300 years old in design, though this particular model had been built just last month. Simple, reliable, and absolutely nothing like the gleaming energy weapons the aliens carried. Rodriguez had been fighting pirates and raiders for 15 years, and this old rifle had never let him down. Around him, 11 other human soldiers prepared their equipment with the same careful attention. They moved quietly, checking ammunition, adjusting straps, and running through their gear one final time. None of them looked nervous. They looked focused. Sergeant Pete Collins loaded fresh magazines into his vest pouches. Each magazine held 30 rounds of standard ammunition, nothing fancy. Metal bullets designed to fly straight and hit hard. He had grown up on a farming colony where shooting was as natural as breathing. His grandfather had taught him to shoot when he was 8 years old, using a rifle that was already ancient then. "Remember," Collins said to the younger soldiers, "they've never faced kinetic weapons before. It's tactics, their equipment, their training, it's all built around energy combat. That's our advantage." Private Danny Hayes nodded as he strapped on his grenade launcher. The weapon looked crude compared to alien plasma mortar, but Hayes had used it to clear pirate bunkers on 6 different worlds. It's chemical explosives and metal fragments. Simple physics. No power cells to fail or energy shields to overload the system. Staff Sergeant Maria Gonzalez was setting up her sniper rifle on a rocky ledge that overlooked the main battlefield. Through her scope, she could see the aliens moving into position on the far side of the arena. They moved with confidence, their advanced armor gleaming under the artificial sunlight. Energy shields flickered around them like soap bubbles made of light. "Targets acquired," she whispered into her unit. 12 Catherian soldiers, all equipped with standard plasma rifles and personal energy shields. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Foster studied the tactical display on her tablet. The arena was set up like a small city, with buildings, streets, and a central command post that both teams needed to capture. The Catherians were advancing in perfect formation, using textbook tactics that had worked for them across dozens of campaigns. "They're doing exactly what we expected," Foster reported to Captain Rodriguez. Classic energy weapon tactics. They're counting on their shields to absorb our shots while they advance to optimal firing range. Rodriguez smiled grimly. The aliens had studied human weapons from captured samples in computer simulations. On paper, human bullets couldn't penetrate Catherian energy shields. The shields were designed to absorb and disperse energy attacks, and they worked perfectly against plasma bolts, laser beams, and particle weapons. But the aliens had made one critical mistake in their analysis. They had tested their shields against individual bullets fired one at a time in the observation deck above the arena. Representatives from 24 alien species gathered to watch the demonstration. Admiral Zexkai stood at the center of the group, his 4 eyes tracking both teams through the advanced monitoring system. Holographic displays showed weapon readings, soldier positions, and tactical movements in real time. The humans are spreading out, noted Ambassador Ishara, her mechanical voice filled with amusement. Do they not understand that dispersed forces are easily defeated by concentrated fire? Our leader, Dexlon, studied the human positions with professional interest. Their formation is unusual. They appear to be setting up overlapping fields of fire rather than advancing as a cohesive unit. Dr. Carter watched from the back of the observation deck, her simple tablet showing data that none of the aliens would have found interesting. Ammunition counts, rate of fire calculations, energy shield recharge cycles, information that the Federation had freely shared because they saw no military value in it. The aliens had never considered that their openness might be a weakness. Begin the exercise, Admiral Zexkai announced over the comm system. Down in the arena, the Catherian soldiers moved forward with deadly precision, their plasma rifles charged with high-pitched whines that echoed off the artificial buildings. Energy shields shimmered around each soldier like personal force fields. They had fought rebels, pirates, and rogue AI constructs across the galaxy. Their equipment was the finest the Federation could produce, and their training was legendary. War leader Thexlon led from the front, his massive frame moving with surprising grace despite his heavy armor. His personal shield was twice as strong as those carried by his soldiers, and his plasma rifle could melt through starship hull plating. It never lost a battle, and he didn't intend to start today. Contact front, reported one of his soldiers. As the first human muzzle flashes appeared from behind cover, the sound was different from energy weapons. Instead of the clean hiss and crackle of plasma bolts, human weapons made sharp cracking sounds that echoed through the arena. Bullets struck the Catherian shields and were absorbed harmlessly. Their kinetic energy converted to heat and light that dissipated into the air. As expected, Dexlon rumbled into his comm. Their projectiles cannot penetrate our defenses. Continue the advance. Collins was counting. He had memorized the technical specifications of Catherian energy shields during the 3 days of preparation. The shields could absorb tremendous amounts of energy, but they had a weakness that no one had ever exploited before. They needed to cycle down for 0.3 of a second every 17 shots to prevent overheating. All units, Collins whispered into his radio, synchronized fire pattern. Count your shots. The human soldiers had trained for this exact scenario. Not random shooting, but precise, coordinated fire. 16 bullets absorbed by the shields. Pause. Wait for the cycle. Then the 17th shot would find its target. Private Hayes watched through his rifle scope as his bullet struck Catherian soldier shield. 1, 2, 3. The energy barrier absorbed each impact, glowing brighter with each hit. 14, 15, 16. He held his breath and waited. The shield flickered, went dark for just a moment. Hayes squeezed the trigger. The bullet struck the Catherian soldier center mass. Hey, and the training simulator registered a direct hit. The alien dropped to the ground as the pain simulator activated, sending signals that felt exactly like being shot. He would survive, but he was out of the fight. Impossible. War leader Vexlon snarled as he watched one of his soldiers fall. How did their projectile penetrate the shield? More human weapons cracked from different positions. Another Catherian soldier stumbled and fell. Then another Staff Sergeant Gonzalez lined up her shot carefully. Through her scope, she could see a Catherian soldier moving between buildings, his shield glowing as bullets struck it. She began her count, watching the shield absorb impact after impact from other human soldiers. 15, 16. The shield flickered off for its mandatory cooling cycle. Gonzalez fired. The bullet traveled 800 meters in less than a second, striking the alien soldier in what would have been a fatal shot in real combat. The Catherian dropped behind cover, eliminated from the exercise dot in the observation deck. The alien representatives watched in growing confusion as their supposedly superior forces began taking casualties from primitive projectile weapons. This cannot be happening. Ambassador Hishara's translator struggled to convey her electronic disbelief. The shields should be impenetrable to kinetic attacks. Dr. Carter quietly pulled up a technical diagram on her tablet. Energy shields are designed to handle energy, she said to herself, though several nearby aliens overheard. But when they cycle down to prevent overheating, they're just empty air. Admiral Zekskai's mandibles clicked rapidly as he processed what he was seeing. Are you saying the humans found a flaw in our shield technology? Not a flaw, Carter replied, adjusting her glasses. A feature. Your shields work exactly as designed, but every system has operational parameters. Down in the arena, War Leader Dixlon was discovering that his lifetime of tactical training meant nothing when the enemy didn't follow the rules. His soldiers were trained to fight other energy weapon users. They knew how to coordinate shield overlaps, manage power distribution, and use cover to protect against plasma fire. But they had never faced an enemy that could time their shots to exploit shield cycling. Adapt tactics. Vexlon ordered his remaining soldiers. Use buildings for cover. Avoid direct fire exchanges. But Captain Rodriguez had anticipated this. Hayes, buildings are hard cover, not soft. Light them up. Private Hayes grinned and loaded a high-explosive grenade into his launcher. The alien buildings were designed to absorb energy weapons. Their walls made of materials that could disperse heat and electrical attacks, but they weren't designed for old-fashioned explosives. Grenades struck the building where 3 Catherian soldiers had taken cover. War Leader Dexlon crouched behind the wreckage of what had been a perfect energy-dispersing wall just minutes before. His red eyes glowed with frustration as he tried to understand how everything had gone wrong so quickly. Around him, the sounds of human weapons continued their deadly rhythm. Sharp cracks that echoed off the remaining buildings, followed by the thud of his soldiers hitting the ground. He had lost 7 of his 12 elite soldiers in less than 25 minutes. These were Catherian guards who had fought across 3 star systems and never tasted defeat. Now they were being picked off one by weapons that belonged in a museum. Squad 2, report. Vexlon spoke into his comm unit. Static answered him. Squad 2 had been eliminated 5 minutes ago when they tried to advance across an open courtyard. The humans had waited until their shields were in the cooling cycle, then fired from 3 different directions at once. Perfect timing. Perfect. Coordination. Impossible tactics that should not have worked. Squad leader, this is Private Kekstar, came a frightened voice through the comm. They're not fighting like any enemy we've studied. They don't use their weapons the way energy fighters do. Dexlon knew exactly what his soldier meant. Energy. Weapons required careful aim because each shot drained power from the weapon's core. Soldiers were trained to make every shot count, to choose targets carefully, and to manage their power consumption throughout a battle. As tactical thinking that had dominated galactic warfare for thousands of years. But humans fired their weapons like they had unlimited ammunition. Because they did, Captain Rodriguez moved through the ruined buildings with practiced ease, his rifle ready and his eyes constantly scanning for targets. Behind him, Sergeant Collins and Private Hayes worked together to clear each room they entered. Their movements were smooth and coordinated, the result of years fighting pirates in places where a single mistake meant death. Movement. 2 o'clock, Collins whispered, pointing toward a Catherian soldier trying to move between buildings. Hayes nodded and raised his rifle. He didn't wait for the perfect shot. He didn't calculate power consumption or worry about giving away his position with energy signatures. He simply aimed and fired. The bullet struck the alien's shield, adding to the count that other human soldiers were tracking across the arena. Staff Sergeant Gonzalez had found a new position on top of a partially destroyed tower. Through her scope, she could see the entire battlefield. The Catherians were trying to regroup, but they kept making the same mistake. They thought like energy weapon users. Target acquired, she whispered into her comm. Catherian officer, main plaza. Count is at 14, came Collins' voice. 2 more, and he's vulnerable. Gonzalez watched through her scope as other human soldiers fired at the target. 15, 16. The energy shield flickered, went dark for its mandatory cooling period. She squeezed the trigger. War leader. Dexlone's personal shield was stronger than those carried by his soldiers, but it followed the same basic design principles. When the human bullet struck him during his shield's cooling cycle, the impact felt like being hit by a vehicle. The training simulator sent pain signals through his nervous system that made him stumble and fall. He was still alive, but the simulation marked him as severely wounded and unable to continue combat operations. In the observation deck, Admiral Sexkai watched his best soldiers being defeated by tactics that made no sense according to modern military theory. His 4 eyes tracked the human movements, trying to understand their strategy. They're wasting ammunition, he said to Dr. Carter, who stood nearby with her primitive tablet. He fired dozens of shots for every hit they achieve. Carter looked up from her device and adjusted her glasses. Admiral, what's the most expensive part of an energy weapon system? The power core, Sexkai replied automatically. Each core costs approximately 50,000 Federation credits. And how much does a human bullet cost to manufacture? The Admiral paused, his mandibles clicking as he calculated. According to your industrial reports, approximately 1/10 of a Federation credit. So, while your soldiers are trained to conserve expensive energy shots, our soldiers can afford to use ammunition to achieve tactical goals beyond just hitting targets. Sexkai didn't understand what she meant until he watched the humans in action again. They weren't just shooting to kill enemies. They were shooting to force shield cycles, to control movement, to create opportunities for coordinated attacks. They could afford to waste bullets because bullets were essentially free down in the arena. The surviving Catherian soldiers had realized they were facing elimination. Private Kexter and Trooper Vexilon took cover in a building that still had most of its walls intact. Their plasma rifles hummed with full power, and their shields showed green status indicators. We can still win this, Kextar said, though his voice shook with uncertainty. If we can reach the command post and defend it, we can hold until reinforcements arrive. But reinforcements weren't coming. This was an exercise with fixed numbers of soldiers, and the humans had systematically reduced those numbers to just 2 functional. Catherian's Private Hayes had circled around behind their position, moving through the rubble with the quiet confidence of someone who had learned to hunt before he learned to read. His grandparents had been colonists on a world where large predators made noise, a deadly mistake. Hayes moved like a shadow, and his footsteps made no sound on the artificial ground. He reached the back wall of the building where the 2 aliens had taken shelter. The wall was designed to absorb energy weapons, but Hayes wasn't carrying an energy weapon. He carried something much simpler. The demolition charge was old technology. It's chemical explosives wrapped around metal fragments with a timer that counted down from 10 seconds. Hayes set the charge against the wall, activated the timer. Kay moved to a safe distance. The explosion blew a hole in the wall large enough for a person to walk through. The Catherian soldiers inside were knocked down by the blast, and the training simulation marked them as casualties from the flying debris. "Exercise complete," announced Admiral Zekskai's voice over the comm system. "Human forces have eliminated all opposition and captured the objective." In the sudden silence that followed, the alien observers in the deck looked at each other with expressions of confusion and disbelief. Some species showed emotion through color changes, others through position of limbs or modulation of sounds, but the feeling was universal. They had just watched their finest soldiers defeated by weapons. Their great-grandparents might have used ambassador. Kishara's mechanical translator struggled to convey her electronic shock. How is this possible? The humans used no advanced technology, no energy shields, no plasma weapons, no quantum targeting systems. Dr. Carter walked to the observation window and looked down at the arena where human soldiers were helping wounded Catherians to their feet. "Ambassador, may I ask you something? How long has your species been using energy weapons?" "Approximately 8,000 years, Hishara replied through her translator. "And in all that time, have you ever fought an enemy that didn't use energy weapons?" There was a long pause. "No. Every spacefaring species develops energy weapons as soon as they achieve faster than light travel. It is the natural progression of military technology." Carter nodded and made a note on her tablet. "Admiral Zekskai, the same question. How long have Catherians used energy weapons?" 12,000 years, the Admiral replied, his voice thoughtful. "And war leader, Dexlon, has fought in 17 campaigns. Many of those were against enemies using kinetic weapons." Zekskai's mandibles stopped clicking as he realized the implication. None. Every enemy force has used standard energy weapon doctrine. Down in the arena, Captain Rodriguez was shaking hands with war leader Dexlon. The massive alien looked confused but not angry. Professional soldiers could respect skill, even when they didn't understand it. "Your tactics," Dexlon rumbled, his voice like distant thunder. "They were unlike anything in our tactical databases. You fought as if our shields and armor meant nothing." Rodriguez smiled and patted his rifle. "War leader, your shields and armor are designed to stop energy weapons, but we don't use energy weapons. But surely you could learn our tactics, adapt to fight as we fight." "We could," Rodriguez agreed. "But why would we abandon something that works to copy something that doesn't work against us?" It's the alien commander. "I thought about this for a long moment. 'Cause our way is more advanced." "Advanced isn't always better," Rodriguez replied. "Sometimes it's just different." Dr. Carter was explaining the demonstration to the assembled alien observers. "You've all optimized your military doctrine around energy weapons. Your shields, your armor, your tactics, your training. Everything assumes that your enemy will fight the same way you do. But that is logical," protested the Christech delegate, his crystalline form chiming with confusion. "Energy weapons are superior to kinetic weapons in every measurable category. In every category you choose to measure," Carter corrected. "But you're not measuring the right things. You measure energy output, penetration capability, against energy-resistant materials, and efficiency of power consumption. You don't measure cost of ammunition, reliability in adverse conditions, or effectiveness against enemies who don't follow your tactical assumptions." The debriefing room aboard the Federation station buzzed with confused chatter in a dozen different languages. Representatives from every major species sat around the curved table. Their various forms of communication creating a symphony of clicks, hisses, chimes, and electronic sounds. But for the first time since humans had joined the Galactic Federation. None of them were laughing at human technology. War leader Thexlon sat across from Captain Rodriguez, his massive frame hunched forward as he studied a holographic replay of the battle. His red eyes tracked every movement, every shot, every tactical decision that had led to his complete defeat. The replay showed him exactly what had happened, but it still didn't explain how it was possible. "Show me the shield penetration sequence again," Thixlan requested, its voice carrying none of its earlier confidence. The hologram rewound and played the moment when Sergeant Collins had first exploited the shield cycling weakness. 16 shots, absorbed harmlessly, then the 17th finding its mark during the 0.3 of a second when the shield went dark. 17 shots, Thexlon muttered. "You knew exactly how many shots our shields could absorb before they needed to cycle." Rodriguez nodded calmly. "We studied your technology specifications for 3 days. Your Federation database is very thorough, but those specifications are publicly available to prevent friendly fire incidents," Admiral Zexkai interjected, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence. "Every species has access to that information." Dr. Carter looked up from her tablet, where she had been taking notes throughout the debriefing. "That's correct, Admiral. But apparently, no one else ever thought to use that information as a tactical advantage." Ambassador Hishar mechanical translator, crackled with electronic confusion. "Why would we, all combat forces, use energy weapons? Shield cycling is irrelevant when both sides have the same limitations." "Exactly," said Lieutenant Colonel Foster, speaking for the first time since the debriefing began. "You've all been fighting mirror matches for so long that you forgot other approaches were possible." The Christic delegate chimed like breaking glass. "But energy weapons are superior in every measurable way. They have greater range, higher damage output, and more precise targeting capabilities." Private Hayes, who had been quietly listening to the discussion, finally spoke up. "Sir, if I may, my grenade launcher has a range of 400 meters and uses chemical explosives that your building materials can't disperse. How is that inferior?" The alien delegate's crystalline form flickered with what might have been embarrassment. "Explosive device destroyed materials specifically designed to resist energy weapons, because they weren't designed to resist explosives," Hayes replied simply. "You've optimized your defenses against one type of attack and forgot about all the others." Staff Sergeant Gonzalez spread a tactical map across the table, showing the arena, layout, and firing positions. "We've been fighting pirates and raiders for 15 years. Most of them use mixed technology, some energy weapons, some kinetic weapons, some explosives. We learned to adapt to whatever the enemy brought to the fight." War leader Thexlon studied the map with professional interest. "Your positioning was completely unconventional. You didn't try to hold ground or establish strong defensive positions. You moved constantly. Energy weapons need time to lock onto targets," Rodriguez explained. "They have to track heat signatures, calculate range, and account for energy dispersion over distance. Kinetic weapons just need line of sight and basic physics." Admiral Zixkai pulled up more data on his personal display. "According to our analysis, your soldiers fired an average of 250 rounds each during the 30-minute engagement. Our soldiers fired an average of 43 shots each." "Your soldiers were trying to conserve power," Collins said. "Each shot from a plasma rifle drains the power core. It's too many shots too quickly and the weapon overheats or runs out of energy. Our rifles don't have that limitation." Dr. Carter accessed her tablet and projected a cost analysis onto the main display. "This might interest you. The total ammunition cost for our 12 soldiers in that engagement was approximately 30 Federation credits. The total cost of the energy cores used by the Catherian forces was over 600,000 credits." The room fell silent as the delegates processed this information. The humans had achieved total victory using equipment that cost less than the aliens spent on a single soldier's primary weapon system. Impossible, whispered the nebula-born representative, their gaseous form pulsing with agitation. How can primitive technology be more cost-effective than advanced systems? 'Cause advance isn't always better, Foster replied. Sometimes it's just more complicated. War leader Dexlon leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. My soldiers train for 2 years before they're considered combat ready. How long do human soldiers train? Basic training is 4 months, Rodriguez answered. Advanced combat training takes another 6 months. It's a total of 10 months to produce a fully qualified soldier. 10 months, Dexlon repeated slowly. Soldiers spend longer than that, just learning to properly maintain their energy weapons. Hayes grinned and patted the rifle lying across his lap. Sir, I can field strip this weapon blindfolded in under 2 minutes. I can repair most common problems with spare parts that cost less than a good meal. And if it breaks completely, I can replace it for less than what you spend on power cores in a week. The alien delegates began talking among themselves in their various languages. The tone was no longer mocking or dismissive. They sounded worried. Ambassador Hishara, as translator, worked overtime to convert her rapid electronic speech. If kinetic weapons are so effective against our defenses, why has no other species adopted them? Because every other species joined the Federation after they developed energy weapons, Carter explained. They got access to advanced technology immediately and never needed to develop alternatives. Humans are different because we developed our military doctrine in isolation. You were forced to fight with primitive weapons, Admiral Zexkai observed. We chose to keep fighting with effective weapons, Rodriguez corrected. When we joined the Federation and gained access to your technology, we tested it extensively. Energy weapons work well against other energy weapons, but they don't work as well against targets that aren't designed to fight energy weapons. The Christech delegate produced a sound like wind chimes in a storm. Are you suggesting that technological advancement has made us weaker? Dr. Carter stood and walked to the main display, which still showed the tactical analysis of the battle. Not weaker, specialized. Your military technology is incredibly effective within its intended parameters. Yes, but specialization creates blind spots. She manipulated the display to show shield efficiency ratings against different types of attacks. Your energy shields are 98% effective against plasma weapons, 95% effective against laser weapons, and 97% effective against particle beams. But they're only 30% effective against kinetic projectiles, and that effectiveness drops to 0 during cooling cycles. We knew this, Dexlon said slowly. The data is in our technical manuals. But you never encountered an enemy that could exploit it, Foster pointed out, so the knowledge remained theoretical. Admiral Zexkai's mandibles clicked rapidly as he processed the implications. How many other weaknesses exist in our technology that we haven't discovered because we've never faced the right enemy? That's the question every military leader in the Federation should be asking right now, Rodriguez said quietly. The room erupted in concerned chatter as delegates realized that their supposedly superior technology might have fundamental vulnerabilities that had never been tested in real combat situations. War leader Dexlon stood and walked to where Captain Rodriguez sat. I request permission to train with your forces. Rodriguez looked surprised. War leader, I have spent 40 years learning to fight one type of enemy, Vexlon explained. Today, you showed me that there are other types of enemies. I need to learn how to fight them, or how to fight like them, suggested Dr. Carter. The massive alien commander nodded slowly. Perhaps it is time for the Federation to remember that there is more than one way to wage war. Ambassador Hishara's translator conveyed her electronic concern. Are you suggesting we abandon energy weapons entirely? Not abandon, Rodriguez replied. Supplement. Diversify. Remember that the best tool for a job depends on what job you're trying to do. Admiral Zexkai was quiet for a long moment, his 4 eyes focused on the tactical displays. Captain Rodriguez, how quickly could your industrial facilities produce kinetic weapons for Federation forces? That depends on how many you need and what specifications you want, Rodriguez answered. Carefully. It's one enough to equip training units for every Federation military academy, the Admiral said firmly. If our officers are going to command galactic defense forces, they need to understand all forms of warfare, not just the ones we're comfortable with. Dr. Carter smiled and made notes on her tablet. Admiral, I think we can arrange that. I should warn you that kinetic weapons require different tactical thinking. Your officers will need to unlearn some of their energy weapon habits. 6 months after the demonstration that shook the Galactic Federation, the training facilities on 17 different worlds hummed with activity. Alien soldiers who had spent decades mastering energy weapons now struggled to learn the basics of kinetic warfare. The sound of gunfire echoed through training ranges that had been silent for centuries, replaced by the sharp crack of human-designed rifles. Admiral Zeksky stood on the observation platform of the Federation's primary military academy, watching Catherian cadets practice with weapons their ancestors would have considered primitive. His 4 eyes tracked their movements as they learned to account for bullet drop, wind resistance, and the simple physics that governed projectile weapons. The results were not impressive. They're treating the rifles like energy weapons, observed Commander Morrison, who had been assigned as an advisor to the Federation military training program. They're trying to calculate optimal firing solutions instead of just aiming and shooting. Below them, a young Catherian cadet missed his target by 3 feet. He immediately began adjusting settings on his rifle's simple optical scope, searching for electronic assistance that didn't exist. Cadet Nexstar called out Sergeant Collins, who had volunteered to help train alien soldiers. Stop thinking so hard. Point the weapon at what you want to hit and squeeze the trigger. But Sergeant, the cadet replied in heavily accented Federation standard. How do I calculate trajectory compensation for gravitational variance and atmospheric density? Collins walked over to the frustrated alien and gently moved his hands to the proper rifle position. You don't calculate it, you feel it. Watch the bullet impact and adjust for the next shot. Your brain is better at this than any computer, if you let it work. The cadet fired again. This time, the bullet struck the outer ring of the target. Better. Collins nodded. Again, Dr. Carter was reviewing progress reports from training facilities across Federation space. The data told a story that both impressed and concerned her. Alien soldiers were learning to use kinetic weapons, but they were struggling with concepts that human children mastered naturally. The problem, she explained to a gathering of Federation military instructors, is that energy weapons have made them dependent on technology for everything. They expect their weapons to tell them where to aim, when to fire, and how to adjust for environmental conditions. War leader Thexlon had become one of the most dedicated students of human military doctrine. He practiced with kinetic weapons every day, studying not just the technical aspects, but the philosophical differences in how humans approached warfare. It is humbling, he admitted to Captain Rodriguez during one of their training sessions. I have commanded fleets and conquered worlds, but I cannot hit a target at 200 meters with this simple rifle. Rodriguez watched as the massive alien attempted to fire from a prone position, his bulky armor making it difficult to achieve a stable shooting stance. War leader, the problem isn't your skill, it's your equipment. Your armor is designed for energy, weapon, combat. Are you suggesting I abandon my protective gear? I'm suggesting you adapt it. Rodriguez showed Thexlon a modified armor design that human engineers had developed. Lighter materials, better flexibility, optimized for kinetic weapon use instead of energy dispersion. Thexlon examined the design with professional interest. This armor would provide less protection against plasma weapons, but more protection against bullets and better mobility for the soldier wearing it, Rodriguez pointed out. Remember what we talked about? The right tool for the right job. The adaptation wasn't limited to just weapons and armor. Entire tactical doctrines were being rewritten as Federation forces learned to incorporate kinetic warfare into their strategic thinking. Lieutenant Colonel Foster was teaching advanced tactics to a mixed class of alien officers from 6 different species. The holographic battlefield showed a scenario where Federation forces faced an enemy using mixed technology. The key, Foster explained, is not to abandon everything you know about energy weapons. It's to understand when to use which approach. Energy weapons excel at long-range precision strikes and sustained bombardment. Kinetic weapons excel at close combat, suppressive fire, situations where your enemy's defenses are optimized against energy attacks. A Christic officer chimed a question. Okay, but how do we coordinate mixed forces? Okay, our communication systems are designed around energy weapon, timing, and power management. You learn new communication protocols, Foster replied simply. Instead of coordinating power consumption and cooling cycles, you coordinate ammunition management and firing positions. The changes weren't happening without resistance. Okay. Many alien military leaders complained that kinetic weapons were a step backward. Some species refused to participate in the training programs, insisting that their energy weapon technology was sufficient for any threat. Ambassador Hishara was one of the most vocal critics. We are abandoning thousands of years of military evolution to adopt primitive human technology, she declared during a Federation Council meeting. This is madness. But Admiral Zeksky had seen the tactical analysis reports from every training exercise. Ambassador, the results speak for themselves. Its mixed technology forces consistently outperform pure energy weapon forces in simulated combat. Simulated combat against human-designed scenarios, Hishara replied through a mechanical translator. Of course, they favor kinetic weapons. Dr. Carter stood to address the council. Ambassador, we've run simulations against every recorded battle in Federation history. In 73% of cases, forces equipped with both energy and kinetic weapons achieve victory with lower casualties and reduced equipment costs. The debate continued for hours, but the practical results were undeniable. Federation forces that had integrated kinetic weapons into their arsenal were proving more effective in training exercises, more adaptable to unexpected situations, and significantly more cost-effective to maintain. Private Hayes, now promoted to instructor, was teaching alien soldiers about explosive ordnance. His students came from species that had been using energy-based demolitions for millennia, and they struggled with the concept of chemical explosives. But how do you control the blast pattern without quantum field manipulation? Asked a nebula-born student, their gaseous form pulsing with confusion. Hayes held up a simple fragmentation grenade. You don't control it. You position it correctly and let physics do the work. The explosion spreads in all directions. Your job is to make sure you're not in one of those directions. A tease that seems imprecise. Sometimes imprecise is exactly what you want, Hayes explained. When you're clearing a room full of enemies, you don't need surgical precision. You need the certainty that everything in that room will be neutralized. The philosophical differences in approach extended beyond just weapons to entire military cultures. Human soldiers were trained to be adaptable, to work with whatever equipment was available, and to find creative solutions to tactical problems. Alien soldiers had been trained to operate within precise parameters, using standardized equipment. Staff Sergeant Gonzalez was working with Catherian snipers, teaching them to engage targets without electronic assistance. Your targeting computers are incredible, she told her students. But what happens when they fail? If you repair or replace them, one of the students replied. What if you can't? What if you're behind enemy lines with no support and your computer is destroyed? The alien sniper looked confused. Then the mission would be aborted. We would withdraw and return with proper equipment. Gonzalez smiled and handed him a simple rifle with iron sights. We would complete the mission anyway. Let me show you how. As the months passed, something unexpected began to happen. The alien soldiers learning kinetic weapon tactics didn't just become more effective with bullets and explosives. They became more creative with their energy weapons too. War leader Dexlon was the first to notice it during a training exercise. My soldiers are using plasma rifles in ways they never did before, he reported to Admiral Zexkai, thinking tactically instead of just technically. Explain. Before kinetic training, they would fire their energy weapons in standard patterns optimized for power efficiency. Now, they use suppressive fire, covering fire, and coordinated volleys. They learned these concepts from kinetic weapons and applied them to energy weapons. Dr. Carter nodded when she heard the report. That's exactly what we hoped would happen. Different approaches to the same problems create new solutions. The culmination came during the annual Federation Military Games, where the best forces from each member species competed in complex tactical scenarios. For the first time in the game's history, the winning team was a mixed species unit that used both energy and kinetic weapons. Captain Rodriguez watched the victory ceremony from the observation deck, his weathered face showing quiet satisfaction. Think they learned anything? He asked Dr. Carter. She looked down at the alien soldiers celebrating their victory, their arms filled with both plasma rifles and simple kinetic weapons. They learned that there's more than one way to solve a problem, okay? That's the most important lesson anyone can learn. Admiral Zexkai approached them as the ceremony concluded. Captain Rodriguez, Dr. Carter, I owe you an apology. For what, Admiral?